So just a summary of this chapter is, so this man, he has two wives. One wife could have kids and the other one couldn't. So the one that couldn't, her name was Hannah. And this story basically is about Hannah petitioning the Lord to have a child. So when I'm studying, what I do is I just literally just go verse by verse and ask the Lord, like, what is he saying there? So y'all, this is my personal study time that the Lord is asking me to share with y'all. Weird, but okay, I'm gonna be obedient. So what stood out to me first? So we're gonna be in 1 Samuel chapter 1. So what stood out to me was in verse 5, where it says, but he gave a double portion. So talking about Hannah's husband, he gave a double portion to Hannah, for he loved her, even though the Lord had kept her for conceiving. So two things stood out to me from that verse was that Hannah was favored by her husband and greatly loved by her husband, even though she didn't have kids. And I think sometimes we can feel like less than because we may not be married or we may not have kids. But in this story right here, like, her husband actually favored and loved Hannah more than the wife that could have kids. Now, what also stood out to me in that verse was it said that God was the reason that Hannah couldn't conceive. And I was like, now wait a minute. It ain't say Hannah had PCOS, endometriosis, all these fibroids and all that kind of stuff. It didn't say that. It say that the Lord was the reason that Hannah couldn't conceive. And I was just like, okay. And it made me look at my life and it made me look at it like, okay, well, is God the reason that you aren't married yet? Is God the reason that you don't have children yet? So we gonna hold on to that thought and then we just gonna continue. But that just really made me look at that. And then what else I saw was when it went down to verse 6 and 7, where it talks about how the first wife would actually taunt her and pick at her because she couldn't conceive. And I was like, whoa, this right here is 2026. If you tell someone you're not married now or you don't have children now, they literally don't point their finger at you and laugh in your face, but they do be like, really? So what's the hold up? Like, you don't think you're getting a little bit too old? You don't have kids? So I just saw myself in that, how, Hannah felt when the other wife would pick at her, because the scripture says that she would weep and she wouldn't even eat. And I even saw myself in this, how when you're scrolling on social media, you can see when where people have their opinions and stuff like that, and how you can really kind of internalize it and really start to feel some type of way and kind of really even doubt the promises of God based off of people picking at you, things like that. All right, so the next point that I want to get to is it says that in verse 8, it says that Hannah's husband said, Hannah, why are you crying? And it says, why won't you eat? Why are you troubled? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? So the husband was saying, like, Hannah, like, girl, like, can't you, am I not better to you than 10 sons? And what that made me look at was, like, a lot of times I can discredit everything that's going on. Like, all the things that I do have for the one thing that I don't have. And I just felt the Lord saying, like, Naisha, am I not better to you than a husband? And I was like, oh, God, help us, Jesus. So that really made me kind of look at my heart posture and be like, wait, let's keep is the main thing really the main thing? So, that part I even like reading it and saying it out loud, it was like, Lord, like the Lord is saying, like, am I not enough? Am I not enough? Jesus. All right, so then going on down to verse 10, it says that deeply hurt, Hannah prayed to the Lord and wept with many tears. Making a vow, she pleaded, Lord of armies, if you will take notice of your servant's affliction, remember and not forget me, and give your servant a son, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and his hair will never be cut. So some of the things that I took from this was that Hannah did not let her emotions stop her from coming to God. I love that about her. I love that about Hannah, and I want to be like Hannah, because there are some times where I let my emotions, I let my disappointments, I let that actually push me further away from God instead of pushing me to the Lord. But Hannah brought all her hurt and all her pain to the Lord. And even going back to verse 7, where it says years after years. So it doesn't say how long Hannah waited, But it says years after year. So guess what? That means it was more than 1 year. And more than 1 year is what? A long time. So at years of disappointment, years of hurt, guess what? Hannah still came before the Lord. And that is just encouraging to me that you still have to seek the Lord even in your disappointment. You know that should push you to the word of the Lord. But a couple things that I wrote down about this is that when Hannah first prayed, that Hannah acknowledged who God was, and she said, Lord of the armies. Like, she acknowledged who God was, that he is a God who fights for us. That Hannah took, at that moment, Hannah took her eyes off of the situation and put her eyes on who God actually was. And she acknowledged him for who he was. He is the Lord of armies, the God who fights for us. And then she says, will you take notice of your servant's affliction? So 2 things stood out to me there was that she asked the Lord to look upon her pain. So she was honest with the Lord. Lord, look upon my affliction. Look at the situation that I'm in. And then I also like that she said, upon your servants. So she's reminding the Lord that, Lord, I'm yours. I'm yours. Look upon your servant's affliction. That is so good. Look upon your servant's affliction. God, not that I'm just anybody, but God, I'm your servant. I'm your child. I'm your daughter. Look upon my affliction. The part that blew my mind was in verse 11 where she said, and give your servant a son, and I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and his hair will never be cut. And the Lord showed me right there. He was like, Hannah didn't get a breakthrough in prayer until she released that idol. So if you look at it, Hannah really had made having a child an idol. But it wasn't until Hannah released that desire to have a child to the Lord and say that, Lord, if you bless me with this, I in return will give this child back to you, and you can use him for whatever you want to. And that made me look at my life, and that made me think like, okay, is this the reason that, because look, go back to the story. It said that it was the Lord that prevented Hannah from having the child. So was it that Hannah was holding on to that child as an idol, that the Lord was like, yeah, I'm not giving you this because you idolize this. You want this more than you want me. Could it be that God is holding back the husband, holding back the children, because that's something that I have made an idol out of? And it is not until I release the desire for a family and for a husband that's when he will actually bless me with it. So the scripture doesn't say how long after, but it said, after some time, Hannah had the son. And she did what she said she was going to do, that she gave it back to him. Major takeaway points that I got from this was, number 1, to have a unmovable posture in prayer. That even, it says that she's been praying over year after year. She went up to the temple to pray about this. And that just shows a steadfastness in her prayers. That she wasn't, moved in her prayer stance even year after year. But even when the other wife was even picking at her, that all that stuff drove her to God. That stuff drove her to pray more fervently about it. But another point that stood out to me was that it wasn't until she released the idol of that child that the Lord actually opened her wound up. So my takeaway point was today was like, girl, you got to lay these idols down. And an idol is just anything that you desire more than God. And it really just made me take like self-inventory and see like, no, that's why God is withholding this for a reason. That he's not withholding this because he's this hateful God, but he's holding this because he's a jealous God. He was like, you will not get this man in his journey and forget about me. So that's what I just wanted to share today, how 1 Samuel 1 really just came for the kids today, and how I'm telling you, there is a word, there is an answer in the word for everything that you're going through.